The distress signal was short, desperate, and universally ignored. It originated from the Virelian colony of Jacker. 3. A backwater outpost on the edge of the Accord's territory. Their voice trembled to the ether, static-filled, barely intelligible. Under attack. Unknown enemy force. Civilian loss, catastrophic. Request immediate assistance. The signal cut off. Every major civilization received it. They acknowledged it, archived it, and then did nothing. Even the closest member races ran risk assessments and quickly closed their channels. The threat, identified as a nomadic swarm known as the Eaters, wasn't worth provoking. The Eaters didn't bargain, didn't reason, and didn't lose. They consumed everything, biomass, metal, code. To resist them was to be annihilated. Better to ignore the signal and save face later than to throw away ships and lives in a hopeless gesture. In the shadowed halls of the Galactic Council, officials murmured their condolences and promptly moved to the next item on the agenda. No action, no fleet, no warnings issued. One by one, the species of the Accord turned away and let silence replace a cry for help. From orbit, cloaked vessels watched as Jacker. 3 burned. Cities were razed. Escape vessels were torn mid-flight by mechanized tendrils. The planet's defenders, a patchwork planetary guard, lasted less than an hour. The Eaters advanced systematically, unchallenged. In a final act of futility, a Virelian diplomat, voice shaking and eyes hollow, recorded one last transmission. If anyone hears this, please help us. Not for politics, not for trade, just because it's the right thing. The file was attached to the now continuous SOS beacon, bouncing across jump relays into deep space. It eventually reached Earth. Humanity's position in the galactic landscape was complicated. They were newcomers to the wider scene, but their reputation preceded them. A death world species, adapted to radiation, violence, instability, and constant environmental hostility. They were viewed as volatile, emotionally reactive, and far too quick to escalate. Diplomats warned others to be cautious when interacting with humans. Treaties were signed, but never fully trusted. Their biology was durable, their technology unconventional, their ethics confusing. To most species, Earth was a wild card best left alone. The distress signal arrived at Terran Command 3 standard days after Jacker. 3 fell. Protocol dictated review and evaluation. Instead, a human general played the message, listened to quiet plea, and stood up, "Give me fleet command." Scrambled task force helix. We're moving. There was no official vote, no request from the Accord, no promise of compensation. Just one message sent back to the same decaying relay. Hold the line. Reinforcements en route. Within hours, 17 warships left dock, followed by 3 logistics cruisers and a medical transport. Earth didn't send a delegation. They sent steel and fire. Across the galaxy, species monitoring the situation watched the fleet dispatch. Confusion rippled through them. Why would Earth risk assets for a colony that wasn't even their ally? Analysts speculated it was a show of force. Others claimed it was a trap to seize territory. A few insisted it was a foolish, impulsive move, but no one considered the real reason. They just couldn't let it go unanswered. In the Virelian Council chamber, one official muttered, "They're actually going. They received the same signal we did, and they're going." Another scoffed, "They won't make it in time." A third added, "Even if they do, what good are 17 ships against the Eaters?" There was laughter, nervous, shallow. Then came silence, because the sensor data updated. The fleet had doubled, then tripled. Small, independent Terran ships joined mid-route. Freighters retrofitted with point defense systems. Civilian crafts flying escort. A full battle group was forming in deep space. They weren't just sending help, they were mobilizing. The human fleet exited slip space above Jacker 3's orbital plane. No warning, no ceremony. Their presence tripped automated security networks buried deep in old colonial code. For the first time in 3 days, an off-world signal made it through the planetary blackout. Jacker 3's skies were already shrouded in smoke. Eater harvesters had devoured entire continents. The population had dwindled to scattered survivors hiding in underground reservoirs, shielded facilities, and crumbling bunkers. Those who still clung to life had already accepted that no one was coming. Then the stars shifted. A deep hum resonated through the sky. One survivor, half conscious from dehydration, turned toward the heavens and saw streaks of fire cutting through clouds. Something massive pierced the atmosphere. Not a drone, not another harvester, a human drop pod. Humanity never promised survival. They promised a fight. While the Accord watched, Earth acted. And in orbit, the first of the human ships began broadcasting. A clear message, unencrypted, in every known language. Jacker 3, this is Earthfleet. We are here. You are not alone. The galactic network went silent. No one expected them to make it. Certainly not with this level of commitment. Alien broadcasters scrambled to interpret the transmission. Analysts recalculated timelines. No one could understand why they moved so quickly, so decisively. For strangers, a Virelian commander spoke what many were thinking. We didn't even mourn them. They're already sending heroes. Then came the second message, directed not at the survivors, but at the enemy. This is Admiral Reeve of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are occupying sovereign territory under Terran protection. You have 60 seconds to withdraw. After that, we consider you hostile. It was not a bluff. Earth didn't bluff. The Eaters, incapable of negotiation or fear, responded with weapons fire. The countdown expired. Humanity replied. In a coordinated strike, Terran warships launched kinetic rods, rail slugs, and radiation-spewing bursts designed to overload power cores. Within moments, the first Eater cruiser disintegrated. Another faltered, its internal AI swamped by code-injecting viruses. One by one, the harvesters halted, systems crashing from electronic overkill. Where diplomacy had failed, brute understanding prevailed. Humanity spoke the only language the Eaters could understand: total, immediate violence. The Eaters had never known fear. They did now, one orbital observer, hidden aboard a cloaked Drelvian monitoring craft, whispered a phrase that would echo through history. They didn't send aid. They sent a fleet. And somewhere on the dying world below, a child looked skyward and whispered the name of a world that had not forgotten them. Earth. The Eaters did not retreat. They weren't built to. Their swarm intelligence registered the new human presence as an anomaly, unexpected, but ultimately no different from prior resistance. Within minutes, their fleets began converging on Earth's arrival zone above Jacker 3, adjusting formations and deploying countermeasures. Hundreds of mechanized harvesters, combat drones, and assimilation cruisers lit up the void, their weapon systems humming with lethal intent. But this time, the void hummed back. The Terran fleet didn't hesitate. As the first wave of Eater ships moved into strike range, a coordinated pattern of pulses lit up across the human battle line. These weren't warning shots. Railguns fire hypervelocity projectiles that shattered alloyed hulls. Interceptors spun out, ejecting disruption spheres. Sabotage drones that latched onto enemy surfaces and melted into control circuits. When energy shields pulsed in defense, Earth's kinetic rounds simply punched through them. No lasers, no light shows, just physics and violence. Eater AI cores, adapted for organic civilizations, tried to predict human tactics. They failed. Terran ships moved with chaotic precision, erratic patterns, sudden retreats followed by blindside rushes. Support cruisers drawing fire only to detonate EMP mines at point-blank range. The humans weren't following strategic doctrine. They were improvising. They were adapting. And they were winning. On the surface, the situation was no less brutal. Human drop pods punched into the atmosphere at terminal velocity. They didn't slow down until the last possible moment, deploying ablative plates to survive the descent. When they hit ground, the shock waves flattened nearby structures. Moments later, Terran Marines emerged in full combat gear. They didn't march. They didn't set up a perimeter. They charged. Jacker 3's terrain was hostile. Chemical fires raged across wastelands. The atmosphere was laced with nanite clouds that disassembled exposed metal. But humans weren't fighting with the environment. They were fighting through it. Their suits self-sealed, filtered toxins, and deployed microdrones to scan terrain in real time. When visibility dropped, they launched IR pulses. When Eater stalkers used stealth camouflage, humans set entire sectors ablaze. There were no front lines. Every squad operated like a knife, surgical, fast, and unpredictable. They used decoys, sonic traps, atmospheric distortion bombs. They called down kinetic strikes from orbit on coordinates they marked with laser pens moments before evacuating. Even the injured continued to fight, jacked into med bays strapped to the backs of walking mechs. Every piece of tech was built for function over elegance. A single Marine unit, call sign Bastion 7, reclaimed a civilian tunnel by luring 3 Eater drones into a choke point, then manually detonating the ceiling to crush them beneath rubble. One of the soldiers lost an arm. He rejoined the fight 5 minutes later with a temporary prosthetic rigged from scavenged drone parts. The few survivors on Jacker, 3 witnessed the madness. They had seen Eater forces dismantle planetary guards in hours. They watched harvesters devour warships. Now, they saw those same horrors recoil under human fire. One Varelian engineer, hidden in a cracked utility bay, stared as a human soldier sprinted into open fire, shoulder-rammed an approaching Eater crawler, and dropped a thermal charge into its maw. The explosion vaporized both. Another soldier picked up the man's rifle and kept moving forward without a word. "They don't fear death," the engineer muttered. "They use it." Above, the human fleet expanded its offensive. Support frigates ejected atmospheric stabilizers, rebuilding oxygen levels in key sectors. Med ships dropped autonomous aid pods. Tents had deployed with supplies, morphine, and emergency medical AI. Earth didn't just bring war, they brought recovery, restoration. To the Eaters, this made no sense. Their simulations didn't account for this level of coordinated chaos. Most races followed structured command protocols. When leaders fell, fleets collapsed. But Earth's chain of command was decentralized. Each captain operated autonomously. Units made decisions in the field. Coordination came from trust, not hierarchy. This fractured system, so alien to the hive logic of the Eaters, made prediction impossible. Tactical AI loops spiraled out. Fail-safes triggered. Ships malfunctioned under viral attack, overwhelmed by Terran code designed not to disable, but to corrupt. One Eater cruiser fell from orbit, its navigation hacked mid-flight by 3 human technicians on a forward op station operating from a repurposed colony data tower. Back in the observation rings of the Galactic Accord, confusion shifted to alarm. "They're overwhelming them," one counselor whispered. "That's not possible." Another snapped. "The Eaters have destroyed entire systems." A third tapped into intercepted transmissions. Human voices, clipped and calm, filled the room. Sector Delta cleared. Proceeding to reinforcement zone Echo 9. Confirmed. Package dropped. Fire support inbound in 15. A silence fell over the chamber. This wasn't desperation. This was routine. This was how Earth fought. Varelian delegates argued over whether this justified re-evaluating Earth's classification. One suggested the humans were overextending. Another said it was a unique case. But deep down, none of them believed that anymore. The truth settled in like cold iron. Earth didn't send a rescue team. They deployed a kill team. Back on Jacker 3, the final push began. Eater forces pulled back to their central hive structure, a command node fused from scavenged planetary materials. It pulsed like a tumor across the landscape. Rather than flank it, humans stormed it directly. 3 platoons marched in tight formation under cover of orbital suppression fire. Their boots sank into the melted ground. Defense beams tried to intercept them, but electromagnetic interference from Earth's own artillery disrupted targeting systems. The Marines reached the structure's threshold and placed demolition charges. Not a breach, but a collapse. They weren't here to reclaim enemy tech. They were here to erase it. When the final detonation triggered, the ground quaked. The hive structure buckled inward and collapsed with a sound like the planet screaming. Then came silence. From orbit, satellites confirmed. No Eater signals remained. The swarm, at least on this world, was dead. A single human message pulsed outward across the void. To any who can hear this, the threat on Jacker 3 has been neutralized. Survivors are secure. Enemy eliminated. Earth fleet stands ready. There was no bragging, no victory parade, just a report. The galaxy shuddered, not at the Eaters, but at what humanity had done to them. And on the fractured soil of Jacker 3, a survivor staggered toward a Terran dropship, staring at a human crest etched into its armor. "They're not soldiers," she whispered. "They're what comes after soldiers." And the stars, for the first time in ages, burned a little brighter. The cleanup began before the last fires stopped burning. Terran ground teams moved in waves. Not just soldiers, engineers, medics, logistics personnel, civilian volunteers embedded with military precision. Every surviving Varelian was identified, cataloged, and given immediate triage. Even the dying were not left behind. Med drones swarmed like bees, injecting stabilizers, administering nanite-based coagulants, mapping vital signs in real time. Jacker 3, once written off as a dead world, now echoed with human voices issuing calm, direct orders. Zone C cleared. Begin atmospheric sweep. We got a heartbeat here, marking for evac. Deploy solar pods. We're restoring grid power. One survivor, half blind from chemical burns, asked if they were prisoners. The human nurse treating her didn't respond with words. She placed a ration bar in the Varelian's hand, nodded, and moved on. The survivors weren't liabilities. They were the reason Earth had come. Orbit remained locked under Earth fleet control. Debris fields were already being cataloged and redirected. Human AI constructs, simple but robust, handled threat scanning, drone recovery, and probe deployment. The Eaters were gone, but the humans didn't assume. They confirmed. Every square kilometer of the planet was surveyed. Back on Earth, the media didn't air propaganda. They didn't celebrate. They broadcast facts. A segment ran on how each member of the task force had volunteered. No conscripts, no bounty, just soldiers who saw a distress signal and said, yes. A teenage recruit barely out of basic training had dragged 3 survivors out of a collapsed tunnel. An ex-contractor now promoted to sergeant had disabled a harvester with nothing but a demolition pack and spite. Every human who'd gone to Jacker 3 had known the odds. None of them had gone for glory. In the galactic accord, something shifted. For years, Earth had been treated like a strange cousin, useful in emergencies, but too dangerous to trust. But now, the question wasn't about their danger. It was about their character. They'd done what no one else had even considered. They hadn't asked for reward. They hadn't demanded recognition. They had simply shown up, crushed a galactic scourge, saved a dying species, and stayed to rebuild what wasn't theirs. Not because they had to, because someone had to. Council security feeds recorded more than one delegation falling into heated debate. Accusations flew. Why hadn't they responded? What excuse justified ignoring a plea for help? Why had the humans done it with no stake, no treaty, no obligation? And worst of all, what if next time Earth chose not to? In private, several member races began quiet outreach, not to demand alliance, to request protection. They understood now. Humanity wasn't just a military force. It was a moral one, brutal when necessary, ruthless in combat, but not conquerors, not opportunists. They fought like machines, but chose like humans. On Jacker 3, the survivors finally emerged from the ruins. One Varelian child clung to a Terran medic, not out of fear, but because the humans smelled like ozone and burnt coffee, not smoke and death. Small things matter when the world ends. The reconstruction effort accelerated. Human supply ships arrived, offloading prefabricated shelters, power cells, water filtration systems. Even now, long after the last enemy signal faded, Earth refused to leave a job half done. An old Varelian governor, his horns cracked from a blast, limped out to address the Terran commanding officer. "You're not like the others," he said quietly. "You didn't just save us. You made it impossible for us to pretend we never asked for help." Admiral Reeve only nodded. "You did. We heard." And that was all. The message Earth sent, silent but deafening, had begun to ripple beyond policy and protocol. Small border colonies on the edge of known space updated their emergency channels to broadcast in Terran code. Pirate groups that once mocked Earth's interference now rerouted their operations away from Terran patrol lanes. Even black market arms dealers began including disclaimers in their encryption. No sales to enemies of Earth. No exceptions. The word spread not by diplomats or broadcasts, but by survivors. Varelians who'd lived through the impossible retold the story in every starport, every station, every meeting hall. How the skies broke open and ships with the Earth flag poured down fire like divine wrath. How the humans didn't posture, didn't threaten, didn't delay. They arrived, they fought, they won, and then they stayed. For Earth, it wasn't about revenge, politics, or power. It was about the message embedded deep in their culture, in their soldiers' creed, in every piece of Terran philosophy. You do not ignore a call for help. It didn't matter what species you were. It didn't matter if there was profit, recognition, or reward. The signal was a plea. That was enough. The Galactic Accord eventually drafted an emergency commendation resolution for Earthfleet. It passed narrowly after long debate. Humanity never responded to the award. They didn't need medals. They'd already answered the only question that mattered. And now, every race across the stars was forced to answer it themselves. What would they do next time? Because there would be a next time. The galaxy was not safe. The Eaters were only one of many threats lurking in its shadows. But now, that shadow feared the light from a small blue planet near a yellow star. Back on Jacker, 3, the last of the Eater remnants, fragments buried in deep soil, were unearthed and destroyed. Not stored, not studied, burned to ash. Humans understood certain truths the rest of the galaxy hadn't learned yet. Some threats don't get caged. They get erased. And when the final sweep finished, Earthfleet prepared to withdraw. Orders came to return home, resupply, rest. But not all ships left. 2 remained behind, not in orbit, but grounded, converted into defense stations. Earth left them as a promise. If the Eaters came back, they wouldn't be facing a colony. They'd be facing Earth. It didn't take long before the rest of the galaxy reacted. Not with gratitude, but with apprehension. Whispers spread in quiet corners of space stations and underworld cantinas. Not of the Eaters, but of the humans who erased them in less than one planetary cycle. The same humans that entire governments had labeled unstable, over-militarized, emotionally volatile. Now, they were being called something else. Inevitable. The galactic superpowers didn't know how to respond. Most had chosen silence when the SOS from Jacker 3 was first broadcast. Some had even suppressed the signal internally, afraid of stirring fear among their own citizens. Now that Earth had answered it with a full fleet and zero negotiation, their silence looked like complicity. Political leaders scrambled to rewrite doctrine. Dozens of military councils convened emergency reviews of their contingency protocols. Some began drafting new defense treaties, not with each other, with Earth. The humans didn't rush to the table. They didn't make demands. They simply acknowledged incoming transmissions with 3 words: signal received, logged. That was it. And yet, entire empires shifted their posture. Even species that had once viewed humans as expendable footnotes now watched them with unfamiliar caution. Their unpredictability was no longer a punchline. It was a warning. Earth didn't posture like the warrior races, didn't conquer like the old empires. They simply acted, and if you stood in the way, you were gone. In a star system 3 sectors from Jacker 3, a skirmish between rival mining factions turned violent. One side attempted to use planetary hostages as leverage, but before the transmission reached the negotiating table, the Terran ship Diligence, an old, mid-class cruiser, intercepted the distress call. It arrived within hours. No demands were made, no treaties invoked. The human captain issued a single warning: release them. They didn't. 5 minutes later, all 4 pirate ships were disabled, drifting in orbit without engines or weapons. The hostages were rescued, fed, and quietly returned to their homes. Earth didn't leave a signature, only a data log of the event, tagged and time-stamped. It wasn't heroism. It was habit. This pattern repeated. Not frequently, but enough to matter. Each time a world called out in desperation, there was a non-zero chance Earth would hear and act, not because they sought expansion or dominance, but because they couldn't ignore suffering. That was the part the galaxy struggled to understand. Humans were not merciful. They were relentless. When they responded to injustice, they didn't negotiate. They ended it. And that was terrifying. On Jacker 3, reconstruction was nearly complete. The surviving Varelians had formed a new provisional government, not under Earth's control, not as a puppet state, entirely independent but permanently allied by experience. The new planetary flag bore 3 stars above the Varelian crest. Below it, a single, unassuming line in Terran Standard. We remember who came. Admiral Reeve returned once, briefly, to survey the memorial. A simple plinth stood among a garden where the hive node once sprawled. It bore no names, no dates, just the signal that started it all. SOS, Jacker and Ree, we're still alive. Please, anyone? And below it, Earth's response. Understood. Deploying. She didn't speak during the visit. She didn't need to. The galaxy had learned something it had long forgotten. Peace wasn't guaranteed by law or diplomacy or ancient traditions. It was protected by those who stood up when no one else did. The ones willing to answer call not because they were asked to, but because they couldn't live with themselves if they didn't. That was the terrifying truth behind humanity's growing legend. They didn't think they were special. They just thought someone had to be first. And while other species waited for the right moment, the right alliances, the perfect justification, humans acted. Not cleanly, not perfectly, but decisively. In time, the Galactic Accord revised Earth's classification from conditional member to active stabilizer. A meaningless title, as far as most humans were concerned. But to the rest of the galaxy, it was more than bureaucratic. It was a signal. Earth wasn't just allowed to be at the table anymore. Earth was now part of the Foundation. Pirate lords rewrote their engagement doctrines. Avoid Terran proximity. Smugglers encoded navigation routes with dead zones marked in red. Places Earth had intervened before. Mercenaries began pricing contracts higher if there was a chance of Terran interference. Even warlords grew cautious. It wasn't out of fear that humans might retaliate. It was because they might notice. And if Earth noticed, everything else changed. On the edges of explored space, new civilizations took note. Worlds previously isolated began broadcasting in Terran Standard alongside their own languages. Not as submission, but as recognition. They didn't say, protect us. They said, we see you. And Earth, never seeking an empire, didn't build one. They built something worse for tyrants and monsters. A reputation. One strong enough that when a deep space research outpost vanished in the Calyx expanse, the distress beacon was only half formed before fleets rerouted themselves away from the sector. Earth hadn't even responded yet, but someone might be watching, and no one wanted to be next.